Hey guys, it's Eddie, and today I am back with another movie to review for you all. Now, today's movie was requested of me by my very good friend Anne, who I love very much, and she was just telling me how much she fell in love with this film when I watched it, and I agreed with her because that is also what happened to me when I watched this film. So of course I said yes to reviewing it for her and for you guys. So today's film is The Shawshank Redemption, adapted from Stephen King's novella Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. This is such a brilliant film. I'm going to warn you guys now that there may not be many valid criticisms of this movie that I can bring to light, because I think many who watch this will agree with me that it is literally possibly the closest you can get to a perfect film. There is not a lot with this film that you can fault, and for that reason I may just be in this review gushing praise and not much else. But without further ado, let's get started. So this movie centres around the character of Andy Dufresne, played by Tim Robbins, and at the beginning we see him going through a trial of whether he murdered his wife and her lover. And we don't know if he did it. He was convicted for it, but Andy continuously throughout the movie protests his innocence, and we see him go to Shawshank prison, where he meets Red, played fantastically by Morgan Freeman, and he asks Red to acquire for him a rock hammer, so that he can tunnel his way out of the prison. And the movie sort of centres around all the things that befall Andy while he tries to slowly, over the years, dig his way out of there. And some of the events that happen to him are not very nice. There are scenes, or implied scenes, with some characters called the Sisters, who are two inmates that assault Andy continuously. And there's a lot of hardships going on in this prison. There are some really nasty characters, in particular the warden, played by Bob Gunton, and it's just a really sort of sad, melancholy movie, but with a beautiful and sort of uplifting ending, which is really nice. Now, I think it is always hard to adapt a Stephen King novel to the screen. There have been some pretty unsuccessful attempts. I know that, we've seen, good things happening with the likes of The Shining and Stand By Me, but some I always kind of see it as a difficulty to transfer his books to screen, because they are so amazing. It's very hard to capture that in a movie. But I think because this film is not a horror, which is obviously Stephen King's sort of profession, we know that he does other stories such as this, but because it's more of a drama and it's sort of more in the real world, I think it's the perfect film to adapt. Now, it still stuns me that this film got completely ignored at the Oscars, but it did at the time, and I think that is just one of the biggest travesties ever. I mean, it's just ridiculous that this film got completely ignored, but hey ho, we've just got to get on with that fact in life. Injustice, but there we go. I think that Tim Robbins as Andy is just perfect for the role, because he has that kind of face and that air about him where he can really make a character, he can really make you feel sorry for a character. He can sort of evoke a wave of sympathy for you, and Tim Robbins just manages to do that all the way through the movie. You really feel for this guy that is going through so much, and he's trying his best in an environment that he doesn't want to be, he doesn't think he deserves to be in. And despite this air of mystery surrounding Andy, and despite the evidence that's stacked against him, you still think because of the way that he's played so brilliantly by Robbins, that he is innocent. I always believe watching the film, even though it's ambiguous, that Andy is totally innocent. He's quietly smart, and he's just incredibly subtle, and he just makes for a really, really lovely performance. I think Tim Robbins is always brilliant in his films, and yeah, and I think his chemistry with Morgan Freeman as Red is wonderful. You know, their conversations are just so sort of interesting, and their dynamic is wonderful, because at the beginning it's fairly tentative. You know, when Andy first walks in, he's new at the prison and not everybody knows what to make of him, but you know, Morgan Freeman as Red says, yeah, I think it would be fair to say I liked Andy from the start. And you know, that friendship that is blossoming in such a sort of grey, horrible world is really sweet, and I'm glad that it prevails. And I think that is testament as well to Stephen King's fantastic storytelling and the dynamics that he creates in his novels, and I think that was transferred onto the screen brilliantly by the two actors. Stephen King is one of my favourite writers of all time. I've been reading him since I was young, and you know, I'm just really proud that this movie did such a wonderful story justice. I think that what makes the film is Morgan's really soothing narration as Red, you know, telling the story. He's sort of like the eyes and the ears of everything that's going on. He sort of watched Andy, you know, prevail and struggle, and you know, it's just their life in this prison over these years, and it's really wonderful. And that famous voice of his really captures the sort of bleak outlook of the film initially, but you know, it's really adds to the fantastic storytelling that we get this upwards curve at the end of the movie, and we get some hope at last, which is wonderful. I think the soundtrack is particularly beautiful. The music, when, you know, there are those sort of sweeping shots of the prison when we first venture there, are just so solemn and beautiful. It sort of adds to the sort of mystery and tragedy of, you know, Andy's life. Is he going to make it out of here? Are we going to see him sort of win over the system? It's just, I think that the music is so resonant. It really remains in your mind when you watch the movie after you've watched it, and the sort of crescendo when, you know, Andy finally makes his move and tunnels out, and he's sort of free, is just so uplifting for a movie that was initially so bleak. And there are some really, really clever moments as well that give you sort of tiny bursts of hope. Occasionally they come crashing down, but I think that all adds to the authenticity and the sadness of a prison life. But the sadness is that we don't know if Andy did it, but the way that the movie makes you want him to escape it really captures your heart and makes you so desperate for him to find a way out of this total mess. Another, I think, fantastic thing about the characters, particularly the performance by Bob Gunton as the Warden Norton, is the fact that they really make you dislike them. The sort of the prison guards, and, you know, the wardens, they sort of appear as the enemies in this film, even though they're on the side of the law. But I think, again, that is testament to the acting and the performances in this film, that they can really make you totally loathe them and support Andy and Red 100%. I think the ending is so beautiful. It's one that always brings me to tears, you know, with, you know, Red's final narration, and it's sort of ambiguous but as you see the sort of image panning away, as you know the conclusion unfolds, you're sort of you're given a sigh of relief, because you know that, you know, we they made it, we made it, they made it, and it's just really beautiful movie. And I think it's the perfect ending, because it satisfies you, but it still keeps you sort of wondering, you know, what happened to them next and all of that. And I think obviously that because it came from Stephen King's novella, short story, there were details added to the film that I don't recall being in the book. Brooks's, you know, outside life when he leaves prison, for example, I don't remember that being in there, because we didn't really leave the prison in the book, but we sort of see a glimpse of the outside world in the movie. And despite that being added and it not being lifted directly from the book, I think it's important that we see that. I think it was a great touch. It was real and gritty and really raw and touching at the same time. And I think that, you know, even though these sort of minute details and areas weren't sort of necessary, I think they definitely added to the picture. And they just created more, I think, more emotion, and, you know, made you feel for these characters even more and endear towards them, because it really opened your eyes to their experience. It really made you feel for them, you know, where other films you might not necessarily do the same. I really cannot criticize this movie. It is just fantastic. I mean, it's fairly long-winded, but not any more than any other movie, I don't think. I think the cast is perfect, and, you know, it's just played so well. And I think that it is possibly one of the best Stephen King adaptations to film there has been, because even the likes of, you know, The Shining was changed very, very heavily from the book. The Shining on its own is a great film, but if we're talking about it as a Stephen King adaptation, it's perhaps not the best. But The Shawshank Redemption, there are moments that really take you back to the book whilst remaining fresh and exciting on film, and it's just fantastic. I would, if you haven't seen this film already, I would recommend it to you 100%. I think it's a necessary film that you should definitely see within your lifetime. And if you love it, that's fantastic. You can always post your verdict on any of the films that I review in the comments below. I think this film is extremely beautiful, and I hope you enjoy it, or have enjoyed it as much as I have, because I think it is just fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed this very gushy, very, you know, full of praise review, but I really couldn't help it. I love this movie, and I hope to see you in the next one. That's my verdict, but I'll see you next time, guys. Bye!